Welcome everyone. Today we'll be talking about something a little bit different. I was just watching AWS Analytics for Games, an online workshop. I think the entire presentation is pure gold. Anyone can follow through the workshop and set it to work from 0 to hero. I also had the opportunity to make some questions to the presenters, and now we're showing the answers that were given to me. But let's take a look first at the documentation that was provided. The workshop documentation will remain available to everyone. To explain the best practices, how to set up your AWS account, how to connect with the Cognito. I think they did it in like an hour or something like that, and did the hands-on workshop showcasing everything that they have done here. From creating the Cognito, the EM roles, create the Glue database, the Kinesis data stream, delivery, the identity pool. Then they discussed the theory about their pipeline, the architecture that it will follow. They discussed what is worth or not, or at least they gave some examples of what is worth measuring in your game, the sources that the data can come from, and why use specific services since they have so many. The raw data or the data, if I'm not mistaken, is mainly saved in data lake. I also discussed Amazon QuickSight and their limitations. I also discussed a little bit about the direct integration or use of APIs and how to consume the data using the APIs. We still don't have documentation for O3DE or Godot, but they are likely to make it in a future workshop, edit this current workshop, or somewhere else in another documentation. Technically, it is possible to follow the Unreal Engine or the Unity documentation and adapt it for O3DE engine. I actually tried to do something similar, only O3DE and Cognito, but I haven't managed to make it work. Who knows, maybe they'll beat me to it and they will update the documentation and present it for O3DE engine before any one of us can actually make it to work. I think it is a little bit too much for such a configuration, but at least it is documented and it's probably possible to do it with O3DE engine if you put the effort in. They also discussed some marketing strategies and what type of strategy should you use, if it is a paid service, it is a single player, an MMO, and so on and so forth. These are the type of visuals that you can expect, which are similar to Power BI and Google. They also emphasize the player churn prediction and some suggestions that might improve revenue. They even did use cases of it, type of strategies or things that you may want to apply in your game or in your game studio. So this is the practical example. It shows you how to connect the dataset. They also discussed how to prepare the dataset, how to extract it, filter it, and then visualize it. I would prefer that most of game analytics would start from here and everything above was somewhat simplified. I think it is a little bit too much for configuration when compared, for example, with Google Analytics. So in this case, I think this entire part right here should be simplified so that existing professionals that are experienced with Google Analytics have an easier point of entrance and start almost with this one instead of configuring so many things here that might be sometimes intimidating. You can also make direct queries, but if I'm not mistaken, you do not necessarily need to have programming knowledge. At least that's what I understood from it. The type of visuals that you get, dashboards, are again very similar to Power BI and Data Studio from Google. There are also filters in how to choose data. Probably one of the main advantages over the competition is how scalable it is. And how integrated it can be with other Amazon Web Services. They also have another workshop about churn prediction or player churn prediction besides this one, but we'll have to wait a little bit until they publish it, at least officially. As you can see, there is a lot of content here that can be dissected depending on what your goals are. Again, this is probably the one that interests us the most, which is the direct SDK integration with either Unreal Engine or Unity. Hopefully we will get something else here. The main website or the catalog workshop is here, and additional workshops will be added here once they are ready. So this is still something pretty new. They are still collecting feedback in how to improve and how to grow as a team. Now, regarding the questions, when I had the opportunity, I made all of the questions at the end. So I started by asking what are the plans for O3DE engine documentation, given the close relation between AWS or Amazon and O3DE engine. Since I immediately noticed that the documentation was only on Unreal Engine and Unity. So I don't have to cite, we'll hear their response.
Yeah, Open3D, unfortunately, sorry for that. I did not have time to add the integration between Open3D and AWS services, but definitely, if you look at the code you have on for Unreal or Unity, you would definitely be able to, do the same. It's pretty simple. Direct ingestion is adding the SDK on your game engine project and then adding the code to send events to your Kinesis stream. Yeah, definitely Open3D is a target, and Godot also, Godot engine and Open3D should be added to our workshop. So, aside the target of this workshop is really to send those links to customers to say, okay, you want to start your analytics pipeline? Go ahead, just follow the workshop. In few hours, you will be able to ingest data, transform it, and analyze it and visualize. Definitely, there is more steps if you want to do some machine learning, churn prediction, things like that. But at the end, that's the target. We always say start small, iterate fast, and think big. So that just start small and iterate fast.
Another thing that I noticed was the dependency on .NET 3.1, which the support ended last year. So I questioned them, and they gave the following answer.
Yeah, that's the art dependency on .NET is due to Unity. Unity had some difficulties. At least I didn't check recently. I would say 1 month ago, I finalized this workshop. But it's a dependency from Unity. They are fixed and are blocked by using, .NET 3.1. I don't know why. Clearly, I don't know why. There is some documentation about that. Why Unity is still blocked to use old version of .NET, but I could not explain on my side. It's not on our side. It's really on the Unity side.
I also asked a question regarding Google Analytics versus AWS Analytics. In this case, the question was not answered by voice, and I did not follow the inquiry by Roland in chat because I only noticed at the end. But the question was more or less phrased this way: AWS Analytics for games have way more options to scale, and I have no arguments there. But Google Analytics and Google Analytics 4 often steals the show due to simplicity regarding web and desktop apps. So, hypothetically, I was asking if Google Analytics could extract analytics, and we start to compare both Google Analytics and AWS Analytics. Shouldn't AWS process be simpler or similar to Web Analytics due to intuition or adoption? So Roland answered that Google Analytics is they see a lot of people on that tool, specifically mobile and web games. They then ask, from your perspective, is it about creating a simpler UI or something more? So from my perspective, it's from an adoption point of view. If Google Analytics already exists and is easy to implement, cheap, and adopted across different industries besides games, shouldn't AWS tackle such competition? Shouldn't AWS be a little bit simpler instead of so many configurations to reach the visuals? So this would allow the simple professional shifting from Google Analytics to AWS. So the two questions there is if a professional that works for years with Google Analytics is capable of shifting, not only because of configuration, but also because the work is somewhat similar and he can use his existing knowledge in both Google Analytics and AWS Analytics for games. But feel free to give your opinion. This is mine. I think Google Analytics is more approachable, at least at the moment, simply because of the configuration, not the visuals. The visuals appear to be somewhat similar. The configuration is mostly my concern. The other question was about a public roadmap. So the question was about if AWS Game Analytics has a roadmap that can be consulted by the public. And the answer was the following.
Unfortunately, the workshop itself doesn't have a roadmap. It's not an adversary, so at some point we can share a bit about what we plan to do. So first, we plan to do more and more integration in terms of Godot and engine integration, meaning Godot Open3D. We also want to add another part managed by Carl, which was the churn prediction. So if we're thinking about the game analytics pipeline, it's great to have analytics. It's better to predict, for example, when the player is going to churn, to make sure that we will not wait that my player churn to react. We want to predict at some point that, hey, take care, that player is going to churn, is going to leave your game. Maybe you can, I don't know, push some dedicated live ops operation to offer some gems, to offer some credits to that player to make sure he would stay and still consume your games and bring some revenue. No, that's really the next step of the analytics, is really to combine your data to some machine learning algorithm to predict, for example, when your player will churn.
I also asked a question about add-ons and gems, more specifically gems for O3DE, since it is my main interest. So the question was phrased as if instead of making most of the configuration in AWS, are you considering gems for Open3D engine or add-ons for other engines in particular? This is because I'm wondering if an add-on in the game engine or even an admin page, I think the rate of adoption could theoretically increase simply because you are reducing the amount of configurations that needed to be implemented. And this was their answer.
Add-ons, gems, at some point, yes or no, Um, yeah, we do not plan to create some dedicated thing. As said, today the workshop itself has been built by solutions architect for our customers by working backward from your needs. At some point, uh, we are not some development resources dedicated. It's just I would say outside of our time to build that. We have some other initiative to help a bit more customers to give you a guidance for analytics. But let's see what happens. Generally, we are building what our customers are requiring. So if you require to have some specific add-ons, gems or whatever for the engine you are using, definitely we will be able maybe to prioritize those parts and improve the workshop.
After the configuration is done, I made a few questions regarding visualization and the dashboards. They appear to have a lot of similarities with Power BI and Data Studio, for example, from Google. So I asked if the visuals and dashboards can be embedded into a website, and if the visualization and dashboards could be assets inside the game engine itself. For example, simple metrics about a character leveling up, or even visuals for enterprise applications for a stakeholder or something like that. Here is the answer that I was given.
So yes, those visuals can be embedded with into a website. That's a feature from QuickSight. You can export. You are not. It's not mandatory to consume and use the QuickSight UI. You can definitely build your own visualization and embedded those visualization into a static website if you want. There is a lot of documentation about that. It depends, I would say, game engine. Embedded, when you embedded your data visualization, it will be some JavaScript. So QuickSight give you the right SDK to put it on your static website. At some point, yeah, that's the only thing. If you want to do that into a game engine, there is some ways to do it, but it will not be natively done by QuickSight. Yeah, using an API, it's possible. That's right. So just not natively, but by using API, extracting the information and just sending the JSON content to your game engine and to visualize it, definitely you can.
Other questions that were asked were, what are the known limitations of QuickSight? They also ask about their scalability, if it is possible to create a calculated field with fields from different datasets. These were the answers given.
Do you mean by known limitation of QuickSight? In terms of scalability, in terms of data visualization, I would say the biggest definition today is okay, the number of different visualization formats we have in QuickSight. Of course, there is no 1000 kind of visualization, but I would say it could answer 99% of the case. You can have dashboards. It's a serverless services, so you pay depending of the number of authors. So meaning people who create dashboard and readers, meaning people who watch your dashboard's content. I would say so. It's scalable, of course. Even if you have thousands, millions of readers, it can scale. But at some point, you will have a lot of the bidding will you know be it's a pay as you go, so just be careful. And yes, Etienne, you can create a calculate field from multiple data set, I think. Just to confirm, not really sure, I would say 60% sure, but need to double check. Yes, thanks Carl for sharing your analytics and player churn workshop. It's you will see it's the same use cases, but just another way to transform your data and to use it, but by using low code, no code machine learning services. Feedback is a gift, so make sure to share those feedback uh, to us. Like that, we can definitely improve our workshop.
At the end, they ask for feedback for those who were virtually present in order to improve mainly the workshop. I extend the request to all of you. Take a look to that documentation while everything is somewhat fresh and the team is capable of making some changes. And maybe who knows, maybe you can all benefit from the feedback that we all provide. Regarding my personal feedback, the workshop on your presentation was great. I wouldn't change anything. I think the hands-on experience is amazing. Many people need to get their hands dirty in order to learn. Regarding the workshops, I think the existing workshops are hard to find unless you have the direct link. But once I consulted your main page, I noticed that it's coming soon. So I think this should be a priority since you already have some workshops and you'll be getting more and more feedback if this is available. Otherwise, people need to have a direct link in order to gain access to it. Regarding documentation, I would suggest more transparency and more communication, especially with O3DE org, which is my main interest. Maybe even some videos on their channel explaining how to wire AWS Cognitive with O3DE. As an example, if you go check the Open3D engine documentation, it's still lacking a little bit. So not only people who are getting into Open3D engine and AWS services will have some challenges that they will not be able to surpass. This could be improved if there were only one type of documentation. So instead of making documentation on the workshop, and then having documentation on AWS, and then having a third documentation on Open3D engine, maybe with some communication you would have only one document or one web page where everything would be compact and would be available. For example, the Open3D engine still has an issue when connecting Amazon Cognitive, so you could be potentially losing clients, so to speak, or game studios, because we can't get started, we can't get into AWS services, which usually starts with Amazon Cognitive. The images are too blurred and we can't get in. So even if we follow the workshop, we probably would still be stuck with something as simple as a simple menu. So that is why I'm suggesting that maybe the very beginning, the very start needs to be very clear, so that even an enthusiast like me who doesn't have a studio or doesn't work on a studio can get started and can get experience. Regarding the question of Google Analytics and in continuation of such feedback, I think you should try to compare AWS Game Analytics to other services to identify potential gaps and maybe even incentivize people to switch services. In order to do that, services need to be somewhat compatible. If you pick up someone from Google Analytics that has a lot of experience and they can easily shift between them without having that workload of configurations, I think AWS would win a few more customers or a few more clients. In order to do that, it needs to be somewhat clear that there are a lot of things that are in common, which was my impression, at least with the visuals. They are very similar with Data Studio and Power BI. I apologize if some of the feedback is not directly for workshop and it is more about AWS Game Studio in general. But I think you did, once again, a great job with the workshop and how you are presenting it. And some final feedback maybe for the next workshop, some feedback about how to acquire more people into AWS Game Analytics. I would again advise us a workshop specifically directed to individual developers. Obviously, you are aiming for larger clients with larger game studios, larger budget. but the individual indie developers, I think they are also necessary for your environment, because the indie developers publish videos, they make content, they make tutorials, and without an entry point that is available for most people, even almost for free, with the Amazon Cognito as an example again, with the simple menu, with a menu login. I think you would be able to attract more people in, more indie developers, and they will give you back in return by publishing tutorials, publishing content. On the other hand, the larger studios would then consume the content that some indie developers are publishing in YouTube or forums, and not only AWS Game Analytics but also O3DE engine would grow, and Amazon as a whole, since O3DE engine and AWS have a close relationship. So if you have additional feedback, don't forget to provide it to them. You can write down below in the comments, but this channel is somewhat small, so I don't think it will have a lot of impact. So I advise you to give the feedback directly to them, to AWS, so they can improve their workshops and improve their documentation. I hope you enjoyed this kind of content. It was some kind of journalism where I had the opportunity to interview people who are way beyond and above me. And who knows, maybe I'll watch their following workshops, and if I have the opportunity and availability, I will continue to provide some feedback here in the channel. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next video.